Hello, my name is Blevins. Welcome to Mysteries and Histories. On this episode here, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about and give a little bit more information out on the JFK assassination, on who was behind the assassination of JFK. Now, like I said, for 54 years now, we heard a lot of stories about the mob being behind the assassination of JFK, or Castro, or Lyndon B Johnson, CIA, FBI, and everything else. Let's look at the facts and let's try to think. Let's put ourselves in this position as an investigator on what stories should we believe. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up some facts, and I want you, the people, to make your own decision, okay? And you're also going to find out the reason why I claim that the KGB was behind the assassination. But anyway, let's go over a few of these things that people talked about. First off, let's talk about the mob. Now, everybody brought in the mob being part of assassination because of what Jack Ruby did to Oswald when he shot Oswald. Because if you look at the way he handled it, he actually did shoot Oswald like this. And this is more or less like a mafia assassin right here. He would just come straight out and take a shot at somebody. Okay. And if you look at Robert Kennedy, the same way. When he was assassinated, okay, in 1968 in LA, okay, he was going through the kitchen and some guy came up to him and started shooting at him at close range as well. Same things we see in Jack Ruby did to Oswald. Now, I want to point out some facts here about was the mob behind the assassination. As you just seen, when they did assassinations, okay, if it was part of the mob, they would come straight out and take their shots. As you see when I talked about Robert Kennedy, they would wait till he comes in the crowd. Now, if there was the mob was behind the assassination of JFK, when JFK was going down Main Street or the other streets before he came into Dallas, in Dilly Plaza there, and when JFK got out of the car and everything else, their type of killing they would just come straight up to him and shoot him. But we also got to look at this as well. Remember, Robert Kennedy, okay, and his position that he had was, I think, Surgeon General, or I think that was it. I could be mistaken, but anyway, he was the one against the mafia at the time JFK was president. Now, if the mafia was going to assassinate somebody, wouldn't you think they would assassinate Robert Kennedy first? Because he was the one after them. JFK was doing other stuff. He wasn't going against the mob at that time. He was doing other stuff. Why would somebody go after their brother and not after the person that's after them all the time? Okay, which what Robert Kennedy was doing. So see, he still was in office 7 months after JFK was assassinated anyway. So he was still performing his duties and everything else even after JFK was assassinated for 7 months until he ran for Senate. And so you see what I'm saying is Robert Kennedy was after the mob at that point. It wasn't JFK, it was the mob. It was Robert Kennedy was after the mob. So wouldn't you think they would have took out Robert Kennedy and not JFK? Think about that one for a moment. Now, as I point out in my research, that the assassination of JFK was more of um, military style. Okay, we got the gunman's location, they're placed on the right side, and the way in order they took their shots and stuff, distraction shots taken after fatal shots. Okay, this is more or less a military style assassination. It's not more, excuse me, I'm about to sneeze again. My allergies with this, while they're going up and down stuff to make my allergies really hard on me right now. But anyway, this is more of a military setup than it was in a mob setup. As I point out, a mob would come straight up to you and start shooting. They wouldn't, trying to plan all this play and that. They want to assassinate you. They're going to assassinate you one way or another, and they're going to come straight force. They're not going to just go and say, well, let's set this up and let's do this diagram or whatever. They won't pick a specific spot. Okay. Just like people don't understand. You remember the flyers, which I don't have posted up here anywhere, but you remember the flyers they was handing out. That was more or less like a warning what was going to happen. Okay. Because remember the flyers came out, the wanted posters of Kennedy was handed out through Dallas and everything else weeks before he came there. Okay, so with that in mind, that's like a warning. Okay, and the mafia is not going to give nobody a warning, so we're going to eliminate the mafia out there because I could point out that facts and a lot of other facts to show that the mafia was going to be behind assassinating somebody. They would have done Robert Kennedy before they would have done JFK because Robert Kennedy was the one after him. So we're going to eliminate the mafia for a moment. Now let's look at Lyndon B Johnson. Let's look at Lyndon B Johnson for a moment. Now, was Lyndon B Johnson or the CIA or FBI behind the assassination of JFK? I would say no. And here's the reason why I would say no. Is wouldn't you think that if Lyndon B Johnson, okay, would take the chance of having JFK assassinated in his home, basically his own backyard, because remember, Lyndon B Johnson's from Texas, okay, would he have JFK taken out in Texas? No, he would have JFK taken out somewhere else because he wouldn't want fingers be pointing back at him. 2, Lyndon B. Johnson. Why take the chance of assassinating JFK after he served 3 years already into his term? He only had 1 year left, and then there's voting again. So why take the chance of just spending 1 year in office when I could take a full term, 4 years? Okay, so these are things we have to think about because we don't know at that point. Remember, at that point, JFK was assassinated. Lyndon B. Johnson and JFK didn't know they was going to be reelected yet. Okay, so they take JFK out. Okay, we're still got, well, Lyndon B. Johnson still only had 1 year because maybe he would not have been reelected as president. You see what I'm saying? So he would have took that chance of just serving 1 year. Okay, now people says, well, he has a lot to gain from it. Well, again, people don't know, and people's not going to push these issues, but I do. If Lyndon B. Johnson wanted JFK out so he could be president, like I said, he would have done it sooner instead of far back, and he sure would make sure it wouldn't happen in Texas. And then you would have to think about, well, why did Lyndon B. Johnson continue everything that JFK was continuing? Okay, if he was going to sit there and they wanted to stop JFK from doing things he was doing, wouldn't Lyndon B. Johnson stop it? But he didn't. He still continued everything that JFK was pushing. Lyndon B. Johnson did. They're not going to tell you this, okay, but it's the truth. Just like Mrs. Kennedy continued contact with Lyndon B. Johnson, okay, and Robert Kennedy still continued working for LBJ during the rest of that term of that year, of that term, the rest of the time of that term. Then when Lyndon B. Johnson luckily got reelected, Robert Kennedy ran for Senate after that. But like I said, we have to sit there and look at all these facts. Now, again, back to Lyndon B. Johnson, FBI, and the CIA. If there's behind assassination, wouldn't they know exactly where they position their gunmen at? Wouldn't they know exactly how many shots were fired that day? Think about this for a moment. The CIA, FBI, or Lyndon B. Johnson was behind the assassination of JFK. They would actually know where the assassins were located at. Am I correct? They would have made sure that no one, and I mean exactly no one, saw the Zapruder film, saw the Oliver Nix film, saw the Bell film, or any other films. Why? Because they hold these evidence. Because see, this is one thing people don't understand when I analyze films and stuff, and questions being brought up. Now, I want to show you this. The Mormon photo. The Mormon photo shows two gunmen inside of shelter number 3. Okay, so with the FBI, CIA, or Lyndon B Johnson planning this assassination of JFK, wouldn't they know exactly where these gunmen were located at? Do you think today anybody would have seen the Mary Mormon photo? Think about that one for a minute, because the Mormon photo shows two gunmen inside of shelter number 3 with rifles. They would know to exactly say, well, hey, wait a minute. We had the two gunmen inside of shelter number 3. So they're going to look at this image here, and they're going to look and see if there's any gunmen there. If that image was taken and it shows the gunmen, because they would say, okay, well, this image here shows the two gunmen that we placed it inside shelter number 3. So we can't show this, so we're going to have to destroy it somehow, and we'll come up with a cover-up to say how it got destroyed. Okay, like the Bell film. The Bell film shows, well, we had gunmen on the second floor, so let's look over these films and images and pinpoint these locations and look at these locations and see if anybody captured them. And they're going to say, well, okay, now we see our gunmen, so we have to destroy the Bell film now. Okay, because it's showing our gunmen that we placed on the second floor. Okay, the way they set it up, okay, like I said, it was a military setup, which it really was, the assassination. But like I said, there's a lot of things you have to look at when you analyze films, you analyze images, okay, to get fully understanding. Is like, well, if this person was behind it or this person was behind it, they would know exactly where their gunmen were located at, right? Well, then they're going to make sure that these locations cannot be seen in any films or any images. They're going to destroy one way or another, or come up with a story behind it so they could destroy all this evidence and stuff. Just like when we look at the Zapruder film. Okay, we go into the Zapruder film and we see in frame 399 a bullet striking there. If they know exactly where these bullets striking at, okay, and we see a bullet strike there, and then we see another bullet strike up here, and we see the bullet ricocheting up here, and then we have all these images right here taken of that location, right? And see the bullet on the ground and everything else. Wouldn't they tore up this manhole cover? Wouldn't this manhole been completely destroyed? But it's not. It's not been touched since even today. It's still there. So you see, excuse me, when you look at the investigation, how they did it, there's a lot of things they overlooked. Now, if they knew the location of these gunmen, and they knew for a fact that these shots occurred at these locations and stuff, they would cover up the evidence. Wouldn't you think so? But, excuse me, but they didn't. As you see, we see the Bell film. I mean, yeah, we see the Bell film. We see the Mormon photo. We see the Zapruder film. We see the Orville Nix film and stuff. If they knew exactly, if they was behind the assassination, this is Lyndon B Johnson, CIA, FBI, or any part of the government, they want to know exactly where they placed their gunmen, wouldn't they? They know exactly, make sure they won't show films or images of those locations because someone might have took it. So when they view these films, they view these images, they're going to sit there and have their professionals on it review and say, okay, well, we see the gunman here, we see these shots taken here, but none of them's never seen it. None of them's never found it. Even these top so-called JFK researchers claim to analyze these films and send these films analyzed, and none of them found this evidence, but I found it. Because, see, remember, evidence, they don't want to leave a trail of evidence, period. So if they knew exactly what was going on, they knew the location of their gunman, they're going to make sure no cameras or films or anything taken of those locations. And if anybody took any films or images of those locations, what's going to happen? They're going to destroy them, or they're going to hide them where no one can see them or find them. So, and that part a little bit alone eliminates Lyndon B Johnson, CIA, FBI, and our government. We know was military hit when we line up all the evidence. But now we're eliminating them because they would have knew exactly where they placed their gunmen and stuff. Am I correct? They would have made sure that none of these images or films ever seen, especially of the locations, but they still didn't know it. They would have made sure that manhole cover concrete was destroyed, but it's still there today. So you see, there's a lot of things you got to look at and you got to think about. Let's look at Castro for a moment. Now, everybody says, well, Castro was behind the assassination of JFK. Was he or was he not behind the assassination? Well, let's think about that for a minute. During the day of the assassination, Castro was meeting with one of JFK's personnels, and he agreed to meet JFK and talk to him. Okay. Then, on that same exact day, after he agreed and everything else, to meet with JFK and stuff, one of Castro's personnel came in and said JFK was just killed and shot. The United States president was just killed and shot. Castro threw a fit. He started throwing stuff all around his office and everything else because he liked JFK. Now, why would he want to take out JFK if JFK liked him? If he liked JFK, why would he have JFK, taken out? These are stories and false stories that people's putting out there that places these people behind it. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, think about this. What don't we hear when it comes to JFK assassination? We hear about Lyndon B Johnson being behind it. We hear about the mob being behind it. We hear about the CIA, FBI being behind it. And Castro, as I said, put behind it in Cuba. One person ain't on our mission. Russia or the KGB. I wonder why. When you look at the facts here and you start to think and you start piecing it all together, well, military, Russia has a great military. They do. The JFK assassination was a military hit. Okay. And Russia already spoke with JFK. But what did they have to gain from it? Well, let's see. We was in Cold War at that time, right? We was Russia and the United States was Russian. Russia and the United States wanted to be the first ones out in space. So we got that space race going on. We got that Cold War going on. And JFK was going to go to Cuba to be with Castro. But they needed him not to go to Cuba. Why? Let's look at that for a moment. Here's the United States. Here's Cuba down here if you watch my cursor. JFK was going to meet with Castro in Cuba. Now, he already met with Russian prime ministers and all that. He's already took care of everything with Russia. But his next step was to go to Cuba. So he was going to go to Cuba and meet Castro. But they wanted to stop him before he got to Cuba. Why? What's in Cuba? What is so important about Cuba that they want to stop him? Well, let's look at that for a moment. Right here, you see the circle? That's where the Soviet Union, or Russia, had their nuclear warheads. They had nuclear bombs there. They had nuclear subs there. And remember, if you watched the History Channel, all these other ones, and if you go through the history books, you're going to find out and see where they said that actually Hitler escaped from from Russia, and he went to Cuba. Hitler did. And they're looking down in Cuba right now for evidence if Hitler was actually in Cuba. But let's think about that for a minute. Because remember, during the First World War, Second World War, and everything else, there was a lot of Russian spies coming to the United States. You wouldn't know a Russian spy from an actual American. Russia's spies was always here in the United States, all over the place. And they always looked out for that. But they wanted to stop Kennedy from going to Cuba because they didn't want Kennedy to know about actually how many nuclear warheads they have in Cuba. Russia didn't. They didn't want to know about all the subs they had there and ships with nuclear warheads and stuff on them. Okay, that's why it was a Cold War, because they not only had it in Russia, but they had it also in Cuba too. So you see, Kennedy was already in Russia, talked to the prime minister and the head person of Russia and everything else. That's all been taken care of. His next step was Cuba. So he had one of his aides down in Cuba setting up a meeting with him and Castro. But then all of a sudden Kennedy gets killed before he even gets to Cuba. Why? So you see what I'm saying? Then we're going to look at Oswald. Oswald says, no one sent me a representative. Okay, they won't allow me no legal advice or anything else, even though it's been reported his brother tried to get him a attorney. He turned him down. The police tried to give him an attorney. He turned him down. He specified one person, which was John Abt, John Abt, which worked for the Community Parties of USA. Okay, because the whole weekend, Ruth Payne and Marina Oswald trying to contact him, but he was out of the office. But let's look at this. Community Party USA. Why did Oswald specifically wanted that attorney? Why did he specifically want to go through there? Well, let's look at this. Here is their logo. This is the logo of Communist Party, Communist Party USA. I pronounced it wrong, but I apologize for that. It's Communist Party USA. Huh. Let's look at that for a moment. Well, let's look at this for a moment. Here's a Russian hammer. This is what they place on their flags and stuff. The Russians do, and everything else, right? Do we see some similarities there? Not this part here, but look at that hammer. Huh. That hammer's in the same way. Look at there. How's that come around? Comes up to almost a point like there, like a sickle. Do you see what I'm saying? I showed you that because it's like people are overlooking the facts in the case. Ain't it awful funny that Oswald goes to Russia and, he marries a Russian woman, which was in the KG, her family members was in the KGB. They come back to the United States. And then out of the clear blue, they end up meeting Ruth Payne, okay? And they move in with her. And then turn around, her husband, Michael Payne, divorces, separates from his wife as soon as the Oswalds come in there. And then we have Ruth Payne being a single parent now. And then after the assassination, Marina Oswald moves out of her house. She was only there during a certain part of time, and that was it. Think about that one for a moment. So you see what I'm saying is it's easy to make a claim that this person behind assassination, that person behind assassination. Okay, but you have to look at the facts as well. Like I said, if Lyndon B Johnson, FBI, CIA, our government was behind assassination, they would know exactly what the pinpoint of where their assassins were because it would have had it very well planned. Because as I point out, it was a military hit, the way it unfolds when we put all the evidence together. Okay, so we know it's a military hit, so that automatically eliminates the mob. Because if the mob was going to kill Kennedy, they would have actually went after Robert Kennedy first before they went after JFK. Two is we know it's a military hit. So we know if we can eliminate Lyndon B Johnson, our government, CIA, FBI, because they didn't know exactly where these shots were. They didn't even know Oswald's thumbprints was on the bullet casings. Let's think about that for a minute. They didn't know that this box here had a butt plate imprint from a rifle on it. Do you see what I'm saying? So they actually didn't investigate it thoroughly if they're really top investigators, which it really wasn't. But they didn't know where the locations of the gunmen were. They just sitting there and know Oswald, that was it. So you see, there's a lot of things you got to look at. And there's a lot more evidence I could present and talk about as well. But then we're going to talk another 4 or 5 hour video. Okay, but I'm just throwing out some little bit of parts here to make you think. Who do you think was behind it now? Was it Castro? Castro got upset over it. He wanted to meet JFK. He liked JFK. Why was JFK so... Why was he assassinated so he don't go to Cuba? He's already been to Russia. They wanted him stopped to go so he wouldn't go to Cuba. Because if he went to Cuba, what he's going to find there? Russian missiles. Russian nuclear war, nuclear subs. Russian nuclear ships. That's what he was going to find in Cuba. So they had to stop him before he got to Cuba. Okay, everything that surrounds Oswald was about Russia, even the papers he held up. Okay, the backyard image right here. Okay, this is Russian papers from Russia. Okay, that so-called fair play for community of Cuba or something like that only took place in 3 months of Oswald's life. All the rest of the time was always Russia. Before even after the assassination was about Russia. When he was picked up, what he do? He had the Russian hammer symbol like this with his handcuffs on, as I point out in my other videos, saying the job is done. Okay, it was they just all they did was played it off. That's why when they went to Mexico, they had one guy go to Cuba, proclaims he's Oswald, while Oswald goes to the Russian ambassador there. Okay, to throw people off because, well, we're going to assassinate JFK in November when he goes through Dallas. So we're going to go to New Orleans, set up this bogus stuff, these flyers. Then when they go back to Dallas, all of a sudden these flyers show up again, but it's about JFK and stuff like that. So, and then Oswald buys a rifle under A. Heidel. So they're setting it up. It's already been planned to assassinate JFK in Dallas, Texas. Do you see what I'm saying? So now they got to put the blame on somebody else real quick. So we can go to war with Russia, I mean with Cuba, and now war with Russia. Do you see what I'm saying? This is why there was so many secrets revolved around, because I think the government really knew who was behind it. It's just Jacqueline Kennedy and Robert Kennedy said, well, if we do it this way, we're better, there's going to be World War III. So we're in the midst of, trying to do this Cold War stuff. So let's hide this evidence for 75 years, and hopefully within that 75 years, things will settle down. Do you see what I'm saying? But I just want to make this video and point out some facts stuff. And this is one of the reasons, a few of the reasons why I don't look at Castro or Cuba being behind the assassination of JFK, the mob being behind the JFK assassination, Lyndon B Johnson or our government, FBI, CIA, not behind the assassination of JFK. I look at Russia more, not Russia, but the KGB more or less behind this assassination of JFK. But like I said, this is only a little part of it. But I just want you, I give this a little bit of advice out here and this little bit of more research and evidence stuff and let you decide who you think actually was behind the assassination of JFK. Because to me, it was the KGB, not only because of this, but a lot of other things too that I've studied and went over. Don't forget that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to tell your friends about it. Share this video and my other videos with other people and friends and stuff like that on social media and stuff so they know this information. Thank you, and you have a pleasant day.